I'll share my screen.
Alrighty, there we go. Yeah, so whenever you're ready, and we'll, like I said, we'll edit this a little bit, just like whatever little conversation we're having right now will be cut and we'll get it on YouTube. So whenever you're ready, take it away.
All right, well, welcome. So my name is Liz Emily. I'm one of the interns this year at the University of Akron Counseling and Testing Center. And so I'm here to talk about stress and mental health and kind of some tips and tricks for how to manage stress, especially in this time with everything going on. So I always like to start with just kind of taking a moment for reflection, kind of think for yourself, like what are some things going on that cause some stress? I think it's really easy to think about, especially as college students, there's so many different hats we wear and so many different roles we have to be in, different things, different situations, and different life domains that we're always kind of trying to juggle. So I think it's important just to kind of be aware of that and to kind of recognize that you are doing a lot, you have a lot on your plate, and with that, we're bound to experience stress in some domain, if not multiple. So stress really, as we define it, would be anything that causes sort of physical or emotional tension. So it's definitely a very physiological response. If you're familiar with the fight or flight response, fight, flight, freeze, as we call it now, just that it's a very physical process that we've developed over time, but it has a lot of other sort of kind of more emotional, cognitive, different domains as well that we can see all sort of working together. So a lot of the times we can notice it through our feelings. So maybe we might feel more overwhelmed, maybe depressed, really anxious. And it kind of depends on, the person and what kind of genetic experiences you have or family experiences or different life experiences you've had that might shift and decide what kind of feelings you have or what outcomes that produces. And similar with thoughts too. Certain people, maybe you're going to have different kinds of thoughts when they're feeling stressed. So maybe someone who's more anxious will think more kind of racing thoughts like I have to get everything done, I'm not doing good enough, I have to work harder, versus someone when they're stressed that's maybe more depressed might have more thoughts of like, I'm never going to be able to do this. I don't have the ability to do the things I need to do. And so kind of just thinking about how these different domains can cause or can illuminate what stress response, what that looks like for each person individually. And then similarly with behaviors, so you can think about someone who maybe is stressed, and if they're more anxious, they might tend to kind of over-involve themselves, get involved in too many things, kind of have a lot on their plate and sort of feel like, how do I manage all these things? And some people maybe would tend towards maybe not doing enough things and kind of isolating or staying at home, having trouble getting out of bed, things like that. And then, of course, those physiological symptoms. So some things, again, that connect back to that biological stress response. So maybe things like increased heart rate, shallow breathing. A lot of times we tend to breathe into our chest versus into our stomach. And so how all those things kind of interact and cause different problems for us in our relationships and just how we cope with life. Kind of along those lines, it's also important to think about stress kind of on a continuum of sort of good or helpful to more bad or unhelpful, because obviously, the stress response is there for a reason. It can help us kind of in the olden days, I always say it would help us if we were, trying to run away from a tiger. That stress response is how we would be safe. That's how we would find a safe place to be, or how we would, defend ourselves. And so now in the modern era, we don't have tigers, but we have relationships that we're trying to maintain and academics that we're trying to do well in. And so kind of being able to appreciate that response is there for a reason. It's there to try to help us adapt and to do well. But sometimes it can be more of a problem or get to be too much. So maybe you can think of times when, you felt more stressed, but it's been maybe more of a pleasurable feeling or more of a helpful response. So for example, when we have a lot of stress and feel really anxious, sometimes that can actually get us to do, all the assignments that we have on our plate. Or maybe even kind of something like doing sports. Like we need some of that sort of physical being amped up to be able to do well and to focus and to concentrate and do perform well. So, kind of being able to appreciate the benefits of stress. And then kind of on the flip side, sometimes when maybe it can be unhelpful is when maybe it's more overwhelming or it causes like a lack of motivation or lack of energy to really do what we need to do. And a lot of times that comes with the feeling like there's not going to be any relief. So really just feeling like the stress is so overwhelming, so impairing that we can't do what we need to do. So these are just some common reactions to stress. Probably many things that we're all very familiar with. So kind of being worried about a lot of different things, having trouble, controlling that worry, lack of motivation. So again, kind of that side of when it becomes so overwhelming that we just feel like we can't do anything about it. It's out of our control. Along those lines, sometimes that leads to feeling a lack of like self-confidence and kind of trusting our ability to get things done. It also could lead to some isolation and loneliness. So just feeling like, sometimes that can be just sort of like it's too much energy to put into relationships, or it could be like I feel like a burden to other people because of how much I have going on. Sleep disturbance, low energy, just having trouble, falling asleep, waking up on time, not feeling like you have a lot of energy to do just day-to-day tasks. When grades become an issue, obviously that's can be a concern, as if all these things kind of get in the way of being able to do the assignments you need to do, perform on tests well, things like that. We also can see a lot of just substance use. Sometimes those are used as kind of a way to cope with stress and to try to minimize it or avoid it, or just kind of, help to lessen the impact that stress has. And obviously that's not always a bad thing, but sometimes when it goes to an extent that's unhealthy, it can be a concern. And then the last piece on here is just about sort of those more physical symptoms. So, we know that there's a really strong link between stress and chronic stress, especially. So, when stress happens every day and really kind of in severe amounts. And then also, and the impact of that on the immune system. And so kind of being aware of how it's really important to take care of ourselves physically and mentally, because those things really are intertwined. These are just a few things that we see a lot in the counseling center and other places, just a lot of different settings. Some of the main kind of presenting challenges that we see. So especially anxiety and depression, which I've kind of talked about already, sort of relate to stress sometimes, just some of those different symptoms. We also see a lot of relational problems. So just kind of, navigating relationships, whether it be friends or romantic relationships or family relationships, and, kind of how stress can impact our ability to relate with people in a way that we want to. Academic and career distress. So again, kind of as I was saying before, if stress kind of gets in the way of being able to complete your academics, in a healthy way or efficient way. And sometimes that can also be related to sort of a fear of how am I going to do, when I'm out in the real world, or is this career really the right one for me? Some of those challenges. And then also this year, obviously, we've seen a lot of students who struggle with adjustment in general, but especially adjusting to COVID and how, the remote learning platform has been really difficult for a lot of people. It's kind of shaken people in terms of, how do I learn this way? It's not something I'm used to. It's really a lot more difficult. And so kind of just being able to appreciate that causes a lot of stress, not even just academically, but in a lot of other ways. And then also just to know that the data shows that suicide is the second most common cause of death among college students, which is pretty significant. So just kind of showing that mental health concerns are very severe and need to be taken seriously. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go forward. So I wanted to just briefly touch on anxiety and depression because those are so common. So just to kind of help you get a sense of if that's something maybe that you experience or someone that experiences, so that you can kind of look out for those signs. So the main kind of symptom of anxiety is racing thoughts and worries that are difficult to control. So I guess it's also too important to know. So stress is not necessarily going to cause anxiety or depression or other mental health concerns, but more thinking of it as sort of like a trigger or something that can set that off. And so you can kind of think about how, if you're stressed, you have a lot of things on your plate, a lot of things to navigate. It might lead to sometimes feeling like just your brain will not stop, will not kind of calm down. Like there's so many things to keep track of. And so that could cause a lot of distress for somebody to feel like their brain won't calm down, won't be able to sleep, or can't focus on a test, or whatever that might look like. Sort of related to that, being or having trouble staying in the present moment. So a lot of times when we're anxious, we're kind of pulled in the future, kind of, anticipating things that are going to be coming up that we're stressed about, or maybe even thinking more about the past and things that we wish we'd done differently, rather than really just kind of being in the moment and appreciating what we have going on right now. Fixating on things that aren't within our control. So finding yourself really more thinking about things that when you're able to kind of take a step back and realize, I can't do anything about that, so I can't worry about it. But sometimes we find ourselves unable to make that, to get the space from that. And we also tend to see a lot of negative thoughts with anxiety. So kind of viewing ourselves negatively, not seeing ourselves as having the ability to do well, or that we can let other people down. And then also, again, some physical symptoms. So that could be restlessness, fatigue or trouble sleeping, difficulty concentrating, sometimes things like muscle tension or irritability. And then for some people, there are more kind of severe physical symptoms related to panic or panic attacks. So that is usually like a short burst of time where just feeling really heart racing, maybe getting sweaty, maybe feeling dizzy, feeling nauseous. So really intense physical symptoms. And then kind of on the flip side, a lot of these come together, or anxiety and depression sort of are buddies in some ways. They often come together, but a little bit different in the sense of kind of like a lack of energy, a lack of motivation. So more of like a low depressed mood, sadness, sometimes feeling very hopeless about the future, lacking pleasure and activity. So, if you ever notice like, hey, I really used to love going on bike rides or reading for fun, and now I don't like doing that anymore. Things like that can be a big sign that depression may be happening. We can also see changes in appetite. So maybe having like a really increased appetite and eating too much, or sometimes eating not enough. And the same for sleep. So maybe sleeping way more than you want to, or not sleeping enough. Feeling worthless or guilty. So kind of related to how we relate to other people, sort of feeling like, am I a burden to people? Am I causing people problems because of, my mental health? Sometimes difficulties concentration there as well. And then of course, in terms of thoughts of death or dying or suicide, sometimes people who are depressed kind of come to that point where they feel like it's just too much. And it's not worth it anymore. And so obviously that's when we would be a lot more concerned. Speaking to that a little bit, I just put this up to know that there are some warning signs for when someone might be suicidal. So just so you can kind of keep an eye on that for yourself, or for maybe people that you interact with, some of your friends and family. There are some things that we know of as kind of telltale signs that someone might be having thoughts of suicide. A lot of it is things I've already kind of talked about, but sort of in more extremes. So of course, like thinking about dying or killing oneself, when substance abuse is really prominent and concerning, purposelessness, hopelessness, withdrawing from other people. So just things that maybe would come along sometimes with anxiety and depression, but when we see that in a more chronic way or a more consistent way, might be a cause for concern. So now I'm kind of shifting more into what do we do with all this information? So, we know that stress is a huge problem. We know that sometimes it can lead to mental health concerns like anxiety and depression. So what can we do about that? So the stuff I'm going to share is really kind of helpful for both preventing and intervening. So, kind of preventing the stress from getting out of hand that it leads potentially to mental health concerns, but also very helpful for people who already maybe have a diagnosis of some kind, and kind of finding ways to rebuild a healthier lifestyle and coping. So the big one is that we would maybe focus on more in like therapy or counseling is emotion regulation. So helping people explore their emotions, how to healthfully express emotions, And sometimes that also includes like how to think maybe in a more healthy way, in a more self-compassionate way, and also behavior. So helping to kind of shift, for example, if someone's really depressed and they can't get themselves out of bed, focusing on how do we just get you to get out of bed and do one thing today, and kind of being able to let those different things kind of domino and help impact improve mood overall. Another area that can be really important is nutrition, exercise, and sleep. So those are kind of like the three, the foundations of like just kind of health in general. And we know that those things are very closely tied to mental health. So there's a lot of research on how important nutrition is and getting kind of eating enough, but also specifically eating healthy foods. Getting some kind of physical exercise. I think I heard recently that even an hour a week, so I think that's like an average of 9 minutes a day, can be enough to improve mental health outcomes. So just kind of doing a little bit here and there to get out of your seat and kind of boost your physical levels. And then sleep, kind of 7 to 8 hours a night, trying to keep a consistent sleep routine. Those things are really important to kind of balancing overall health. Another domain is just relaxation, fun, and play. So kind of finding time throughout the week to do things that just give yourself a break, basically. Even if that's something small, like just sitting for 5 minutes and taking a couple deep breaths, or planning a game night, a virtual game night with friends, or playing some kind of sport. Anything where you kind of just get to take a break from the stress of life and the things that cause a lot more just like stress and tension. Community building, I think of as kind of a mixture of just social support, but also, finding places that you feel like you can connect with people. We know, we're very social beings as humans, and so having places where we feel like we can go and kind of connect with people, build community, have shared values, things like that. And then also spirituality, religion, or values are another kind of area. So, if you're religious or spiritual, obviously that can be really helpful to find ways to really connect with that throughout day-to-day life. And if you're not, just kind of things like values, things that help you take a step back from, yourself in the moment and kind of look at your life in a bigger picture and think, what's important to me? What are some things that I want to work for in life? And then another sort of way to conceptualize it is how to cope with emotions specifically when they're very difficult. So these are some ideas kind of in that area. So one is emotional release. So finding ways to actually, release emotions. We know that if we kind of avoid emotions or just push them away or don't really deal with them in a healthy way, that they're still there and they can still cause problems. And so finding ways to express those emotions, whether that be, kind of talking to other people, having some help with a therapist or even just a friend or a family member. Or maybe it could be journaling if you don't really have someone that you feel comfortable talking to, just finding some way to sort of express what might be coming up for you. Grounding is a nice one for physical symptoms. So especially if people feel like they're having trouble like staying in the moment, or they're noticing a lot of like physical tension or kind of shallow breathing, grounding is really a way to keep you grounded. So a way to kind of stay connected to the present moment. So deep breathing, kind of relaxing your muscles, just like sitting for a few seconds and noticing like the things you see around you, just different things that help you kind of connect to the moment and the space that you're in. Thought challenging is one that's more focused on, kind of like I mentioned earlier with if you talk to a therapist or a friend or someone that can kind of help you work through when we have thoughts that maybe are not very helpful. So if you've noticed yourself having a lot of negative thoughts about yourself or your abilities, kind of finding ways to sort of challenge those thoughts and think in a more kind of compassionate and helpful way. Self-love is one that I think is always really kind of understated, and how it's important to take time to kind of care for ourselves and give ourselves attention. Sometimes people would describe this as like taking a bubble bath, or, treating yourself to like a fun meal out that you wouldn't normally do. Anything that kind of helps you just treat yourself and take a moment to appreciate kind of yourself and your body. Distraction is another one that I think is really kind of on the other side is maybe overused, which makes sense because as humans, we want to avoid discomfort. It's kind of our thing. And so distraction is, often really easy and it's the automatic one. And so, sometimes when I'm stressed, I just want to watch Netflix for a while. I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. And so I think kind of being able to appreciate that there are times when that is really helpful and can be a good thing. Sometimes, especially when an emotion is like way too strong and we might react in a negative way. We don't want to, go with that right now. We need to distract for a little bit. But the important piece of that is like coming back to it when you are in a better mental space to do that. And then accessing your higher self. So that one I think of as kind of going back to the idea of values, things that kind of help you connect to sort of like outside of yourself, taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture. So that could be, volunteering. It could be, just being involved in your spiritual group, praying and things like that. So kind of just anything that helps you take a step back and look at your life in perspective. Just a little bit more on relaxation, because I think this is a huge one that is sort of like the go-to, I think, because it really addresses a lot of different aspects, including the physical symptoms, the grounding, a lot of different things that kind of incorporates it into one. And also it's sort of sometimes the easiest one to do. So deep breathing is, I think, a huge coping skill that if you take anything away today, I think deep breathing is like a huge, really wonderful coping skill, because it really is just, taking a second to allow your body and your mind to sort of calm itself. And it's also, it kind of starts that feedback loop. So if you're deep breathing, it's sending a message to your body that says like, I'm okay, this stress is fine, I'm going to be able to handle it. And so kind of giving your body the information that it's okay. And that can kind of also domino back into how you think about things and help you improve your concentration. It can maybe make you feel more confident in your ability to manage stress if you're able to use it effectively and that it helps you. So it's just one of those things that I think I wish everyone could do. And it's really easy. So something that you could do, even if, you just have like even a few seconds to take a couple deep breaths has been shown to really help reduce stress. There's a lot of apps for this too. So Headspace is one that I've used. I think Calm is another one I've heard of before. So there's definitely a lot of apps to help with like deep breathing and mindfulness. And then I think sort of the last piece that I like to encourage people to think about is gratitude, because I think this is one of those kind of skills that, again, sort of encompasses a lot of different aspects. So this image is from a video that they did a study that basically showed people writing this really awesome like letter that they would want to say to somebody that's really influenced them, and then they actually have to share that letter with the person. And so it's just a powerful, I think, way to, one, help us remember the people in our lives that have influenced us, even if it's, someone that we haven't talked to in a long time or someone from our childhood, or even if it's like a hero we've never met, but just being able to kind of reflect on like a person that's really meant a lot to us and why they've meant so much to us, the values and the legacies they've left with us that have changed our lives. It's also a way to kind of practice sort of social support. So kind of being able to connect to a person that's really impacted us and reflect on like how, we have value, we have people that we can connect to that we have similarities with and shared values, so that kind of thing. And then also emotional genuineness. So kind of going back to how it's a lot easier to sort of distract ourselves and kind of avoid emotions and discomfort. It's really a chance to practice like being able to get in touch with our emotions and check in on like what are our feelings telling us. And I think that's a really powerful experience. So kind of tying this in with the resolution topic. So again, this is just something to kind of reflect on as you think about this. A couple, I guess, points that I have or would like to make. One is SMART goal setting, if you're familiar with this. I know there's like a couple of different acronyms sort of within this, but the one that I'm familiar with is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. So setting a goal that is as attainable as possible. And usually what that means is you've really thought about like, how am I going to do this? When am I going to do this? How often? What do I need to do to set up my environment in a way where I'm more likely to make this decision? So I've heard of the example of, if you want to go to the gym more, which I guess some people, the rec center's still open, but, to set out your workout outfit like in the evening before you're going to go the next day, so that as soon as you're done with your stuff, it's right there. You can pick it up and go. Finding ways to kind of set up the environment that it's a lot easier to make that decision, because sometimes, life is hard and we get stressed and tired. And so, just kind of allowing the environment to work for you. And finding also a way to make it measurable, and so it's something that I can achieve, and here's when I'm going to try to achieve it. And then another area that's kind of up and coming that is sort of related is tiny and atomic habits. There's a couple of different authors who've worked on this idea. And basically the idea is that the smaller you start out with a goal, the better, and the more successful you'll be. So I think the person that talked about tiny habits said that he started doing, I think, 2 push-ups every time he went to the bathroom. And so it was like kind of finding a way to make a really small goal, set it along with something else that you're already doing every day at a certain time. And some days maybe he would do more push-ups at that time, but he would always do at least 2. And so it was a way to kind of like, have a plan, have it within a routine that's already existing, but having it smaller so that you are you're kind of setting yourself up for success and more likelihood of at least doing something that you can also make bigger and better over time. So yeah, that's my presentation. Just a couple things about the Counseling and Testing Center. So we are open. We're doing everything remote for the semester still. So all of our counseling and group counseling is remote. But we're still doing walk-ins, sort of. So if you call on a day, we have openings that you can get in usually for the same day for an intake, and then we'll kind of get you set up with the services that are right for you. So we're doing individual and a couple different groups. And then we're also offering kind of testing in some aspects where we're not doing ADHD and LD testing specifically, because some of that needs to be done in person. But we are doing kind of some different testing to kind of assess different diagnoses and problems to help make sure that we're giving you the treatment that you need. So if you have any other questions about that, you can give us a call. We also have our counseling website, which is up and kind of updated. And if you need anything else, I'm free to kind of take emails or questions or whatever I can do. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, we'll cut that down. We'll put that on YouTube. And we'll definitely send you a link. It might be a couple days before